Let's talk about the media for a minute. People are consuming less news. News engagement is down from 2020. In one poll I saw, each party and the independents even said that the media is pushing their own bias in their reporting. Rick, is that the problem here? Is the media amplifying the divide, do you think?
Well, without question, but I think a lot of people are to blame for this, not just the media, any politician or pastor or even a parent that has been unwilling to speak truth out of fear of being canceled, been unwilling to teach the American value system that should bring us together instead of divide us. We all have a little bit of blame to accept. But when you allow the media to call what happened on January 6th an insurrection, and then a year later not one person being charged with an insurrection, let's face it, the extremism is the hyperbole over what happened on January 6th. I've said it all over the place that those who did break things or in any way attack a cop or push a cop should be in jail. But those were few and far between compared to what happened over the course of a year. How can I compare it, Joe? Because it should be compared. The fact that we're not comparing billions of dollars in property damage and dozens of people being killed all throughout the Antifa and BLM riots, and yet all we want to talk about is January 6th. I mean, that's just foolish to not pay attention to the real threats that are out there across the nation.
Well, again, this wasn't an attempt to overturn an election or potentially overthrow a government, which is what it was seen as by many people. Kristal, why do you think people are watching less?
Well, I think people are watching less because they're hearing people like your guest on this show continue to spew dangerous rhetoric about the truth, about things like January 6th, because it was an insurrection. It was a failed coup on the democracy of America. The other thing, too, is people are beginning to create their own content. And so what we're seeing are people going to TikTok and Instagram and these alternative forms of media to really consume the news that speaks to them and speaks to what they want to hear. Unfortunately, when we're seeing this decrease in these larger cable networks, partially it's because it's very partisan, and people are really trying to get away from that and really understand what their audience wants and really going to media sources that they really want to hear from.
Rick, this is why we like to have different voices on, because we want people to be able to weigh both and make their own decisions. But it is admittedly difficult to do when we can't even agree on the basic facts. I mean, we all saw what happened on January 6th, and yet we can't seem to agree on what it was, what it is, or even how to investigate it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's because we're coming from a completely different value system. And when you're willing to say what Kristal's saying about January 6th, but not acknowledge that the same types of things were happening during the Kavanaugh hearings and the Senate buildings 3 years ago, the same things were happening. Far worse was happening
none of
at
that
the federal
happened
court
again
buildings
like January
in Portland
6th.
and Seattle.
Really?
Come on, Rick.
When did anyone ever skip? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's okay. I mean, let you make the point, Rick, because I don't know how, no one tried to overrun the Capitol during those, though.
They did. They absolutely took over a Senate building. Are we forgetting the things that happened? And even more importantly, night after night, a federal court building was attacked, burned. I mean, those things don't compare. No one was armed on January 6th. We don't have anyone that used firearms in any way. I mean, that was not, if that was an insurrection, guys, that was the most poorly planned failed insurrection in the history of mankind. Rick, you're living in an
alternative universe. Rick, you're clearly living in an alternative universe, and maybe we're living in two different Americas, because the America that I saw on January 6th, I was actually here in the city, and I saw people. Everyone saw the same thing on TV, and so the way that we're consuming this information is clearly different, because you're seeing it as one thing and trying to compare BLM and Antifa to something that, you know, these people were really trying to overthrow this government, democracy as we know it in the United States of America. And so that is incomparable to any other thing that's happened in this country in recent memory and in recent times. And so
that is
to
such
sit
an
here
exaggeration of the facts. No one was trying to overthrow the government. I mean, that's the problem.
There are text messages. There are text messages right now. There are text messages right now from sitting members of Congress who literally were advising the former president's chief of staff to ask Vice President Pence not to move forward with certifying the election results. If that's not an attempt to overthrow the government, then what is?
It is not an attempt. Let's have a reasonable intellectual.
Go ahead, Rick.
Let's have a reasonable intellectual discussion about.
Go ahead, Rick.
Let's have a reasonable intellectual discussion about what the 12th Amendment says, about how the process works, about what Thomas Jefferson did in 1800 when he was sitting in Mike Pence's shoes.
Rick, Donald Trump lost.
Let me finish, please.
Rick, Donald Trump lost.
Before you go with your exaggerations, let me finish. There are absolutely, positively constitutional arguments for 3 different things Mike Pence could have done that day, and none of them were an insurrection or an overthrowing of government. They were following the constitutional process for what you do when you have multiple sets of electors. And for us to now say today that because there were people in and out of government asking for the Constitution to be followed based on their interpretation, that is somehow an insurrection is wrong. To tie that to those people who were doing criminal activity on January 6th, and as I've already said, should be put in jail for it, is wrong. It's not being truthful and honest.
Listen.
I think there were good people that were marching all across this country for racial equity last year that were not rioters and were not tearing down things and burning buildings.
Right,
but that doesn't mean I'm going to ignore the ones that were. Let's be truthful about both situations and say we got a lot of work to do on both sides.
Listen, we are out of time, but we appreciate both of your voices tonight. Kristal Knight and Rick Green, good to have you both. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.